Hi, it is so good to be back with you here in the in-between. My name is Camille. John Lennon has a great song in which he sings, "Life is what happens to you while you're making other plans." Well, the plans I was making was to continue to make these videos. We have been revisiting the in-between. We already walked the map, the terrain of change, and we decided to come back with a fresh perspective, a bit more seasoned, more curiosity to see what else the in-between holds. And it turns out there's so much wisdom layered in the in-between. And then life happened. My beautiful friend, Bobby Lee, got sick. He had health issues, but he was doing well. And then he got sick. And then things got worse. And then we realized that he wasn't going to be able to come back from this particular setback. And so began the process of preparing for his transition and to ultimately prepare ourselves as well as him for this thing we call death. In the new design model, we have some different phrases. I just used one, make his transition. Transition is another way to talk about what happens when we move from the physical to the spiritual. We make a transition from one form to another form. Something that I heard while I was working in Anchorage Radio and had the privilege of interviewing so many beautiful indigenous people here in the state of Alaska. I heard the phrase, crossed over into the spirit world. It was actually my brother-in-law who died far too early from cancer. And one of the indigenous guests I had on used that phrase, and I have never forgotten it, and I've used it ever since because it works for me. It just combines all the truths in that one sentence, crossed over into the spirit world, went from the material world to the spiritual world. And so perhaps one or both of those phrases may assist you as you begin to reimagine your own vocabulary for death and dying, as well as your own relationship to death and dying. Because you see, when my mom died, January 28th, 2020, we probably both had COVID. Wasn't a headline yet, so we didn't know what was happening. But whatever was happening fast. And that was a devastating loss for me. And I was as dead as you can be inside and still walking around with the living. It took a long time to heal from the trauma and the drama of that experience. In 24, when I finally was able to stand up again and walk among the living as someone who resurrected themselves, I knew I had to experience a better relationship with death and dying because I did not want to be so annihilated by the death of a loved one. And clearly, they're all in front of me, right? Like there's so many people, myself included, that will walk the revolving door of life and death. And so I wanted to have some better strategies. I wanted to have a healthier relationship with it so I could, do it better. I had that opportunity with a dear friend in 2023 who was diagnosed with cancer. She fought it for a long time, reversed it, then it came back. And I said to her, Ursula, let's have a celebration of life right now while you're alive. And she courageously said yes. And that was the beginning of me reimagining inside the new design model my relationship with death and dying for her too. And it was magnificent, difficult, beautiful, sacred, emotional, tender. It was everything. To have a celebration of life for this person while they were still alive, to experience the love and the celebration, to be able to talk about what it was like for them to be dying and to know that it was coming was unlike anything I had ever known before. 2 weeks later, she passed. And as I'm sharing some of this with you, if you've had any similar experiences, please share them in the comments so that we all can see what's possible. None of this takes away the sorrow, the mourning, the sadness, and at times the depressed state that we feel. However, by stretching the canvas wide enough, by adding new language, by remembering the rituals that are available to us so we can externalize what we're feeling inside, makes all the difference. November 2025, my best friend's husband, an athlete, wasn't doing well. We didn't know what was happening. Over the course of 16 days, he went from a very fit, athletic, marathon winning runner to a man that slipped into a coma and never came back. Took them 2 weeks to diagnose that he had something called prion disease, a rare, fatal brain disease that involves proteins. Of course, the body makes proteins, so it never reads the protein as the enemy. And it was horrifying. It was shocking. It was outrageous. Our minds just consistently said, this cannot be happening. This isn't happening. And yet we had nothing but evidence every day as he lost a little bit more of himself to a disease we had yet to have a name for. I share this with you because Christina and I revisited the terrain of death with her husband, just like we are doing with the in-between. Because we had already walked it individually and collectively before, we knew we had a chance to do it differently. We didn't want the trauma of this to be stuck in us. We figured, okay, what can we do? Well, we're both spiritual women, so we both used our affirmative prayer, morning, noon, and night. We kept up with our meditation. Of course, we talked, we processed, we did everything we could to stay in the present moment, so that as much of what was happening and the outrageousness of what was happening could be processed in real time, in the real moment. It helped. By the time we found out what was happening, Christina chose to bring Jeff home. Now, I would love to know if you, growing up or even now, have similar rituals. As an Italian from New York, it happened in the living room, in the parlor is what we called it. Oftentimes the body was there. I remember as a little kid, it was a very normal experience. The women were wearing black. Funeral homes did really not come into my life until I moved to New Jersey. And so because we both have this background, Christina and I decided to ritualize the moment when Jeff was no longer with us. And we did. We had holy water, we had essential oils, we prepared him. And when they came to take him, we had a procession, we had chimes. Sometimes you've got to do it yourself. Sometimes you have to trust your gut. You have to go with your heart. You have to ask yourself, how can we do this? What do we need? What do I need externally to outpicture, honor, hold a space for what is happening inside of our hearts, inside our minds and our bodies? Because we brought our own ritual to every moment of that experience, it brought a level of sacredness and participation. That's part of the new design model. Right now in society, you're like looking through a window. You get the hour off for the memorial service, and then you got to come back to work. It's terrible. It's not the way it works. It's not the way the heart works. It's not the way grief, sorrow, loss, and death work. And yet, somehow we do it. We zip up the emotions. We put a smile on our face. We go back in. And we wait till we get home, when we collapse in a heap and release those tears. And so in last week, when my dear friend Bobby took a turn for the worse, I thought, well, here it is again, Cease. You said you wanted to have more time practicing. You said you wanted to be in the presence of death and dying in a way that was less devastating. You learned from your time with Jeff that to be mindful and present to the best of your ability was extremely helpful. And so here I was at my friend's bedside for several days, holding his incredible hands that rode many Iditarod sleds, being able to pray with him. He and I also sharing the same spiritual philosophy. That little slit in his right eye that remained, and both of our souls had a chance to still connect with each other until it closed. I share this with you not only to tell you where I've been, but to also honor what you're going through. We are all on some level, at least many of us, are dealing with grief and loss. There is a grief video inside the inner landscape. I invite you to go watch that. But whether it is the death of a loved one, or the death of a relationship, or the ending to a way in which you lived your life, or the end of the world in which we've known it to be, living in a society, living here in this country where there's intentional cruelty being chosen every day, that's intentionally cruel and hurting people, making their lives difficult, that's heartbreaking. The collective heart has been breaking. We can't hold this. We're not designed to witness this kind of a situation all day and all night long, and yet we are. Whether it's here or in another country, it's happening. And so I come here today to talk about death and dying for all these reasons, because we need to talk more about it. We need to come up with some strategies so that when you're out in the world and you're hurting, people say, "How are you doing?" Well, quite honestly, my heart is broken. Thanks for asking. Or, "Hey, how are you feeling? How's it going since your loss?" Well, to be quite honest with you, I'm pretty devastated. It's very, very difficult. Thanks for asking. To find the sentences that honor what's going on and answer the question honestly. Most people just want to hear us say we're fine so that they can feel good and off we go. It's true for me too. But this is all about being real. This is about living in our most authentic selves, to live our most authentic life, to just clear the table and no longer live in a surface way, but to be real and to honor what's happening. To stretch the canvas wide enough for the joy and the sorrow, the living and the dying, the birth and the death. Because that's life. And that's the in-between. And so I hope that something I've shared with you today has been soothing for you, has been insightful, has offered you perhaps a new phrase or a language, at the very least, just to come back and say, this is why I fell off the face of the earth. And I look forward to coming back and continuing this journey, because in the change cycle, there is something called sacred disruption. And as I've said in other videos, when it's happening, there's nothing sacred about it. But because you come back around again, just like I was able to, that what happened 2 weeks ago was disruptive. There was all this other stuff happening too. My life was turned completely upside down. I couldn't believe it. I could barely catch my breath. I'm still doing that. But my point is that because I recognized it and said, oh my gosh, cease. This is sacred disruption. Because I was able to recognize myself in the disruption, I was able to remember the sacred part. And remembering that not only allowed me to bring compassion to myself, which I did, hand on the heart, being available for my own hugs, crying until I emptied myself of my sadness, I was also able to revisit the moment with more mindfulness, more awareness, more rituals, more tools. It was better. It was still challenging, but there was something about it that was different. And that's why we are revisiting the in-between, so that when it happens again, we can recognize ourselves. We can recognize what's happening, dig into the toolbox, and do what we can to support ourselves as we're walking from what was and what is yet to be, from someone we love being here to someone we love no longer being physically here, from who we were to who we are becoming. Take super good care of yourself. And thanks for watching.